Okay, so welcome to my talk on from Unit 2, Teaching, Learning and Assessment in Education and Training. This is my own reflection. So this is me and the 4 areas that I'm going to talk about today.
Is that before or after a lesson? You're looking a little bit...
The only picture I like of myself is my glasses on, so far. So reflecting across the last 14, 15 months in particular, over the time of doing this course and doing my teacher training, as it were, and hopefully showing how my practice has developed and grown. This is also me standing here doing a presentation with just some minimal notes on some cards for the first time and not with a big script. So we're going to see how this goes. I did practice it last night and it went okay, but we'll see what happens today. So, my first one, teaching learning approaches. This is something I wanted to show that I've developed using recently. And this is my roll cards. And I kind of brought this in because my teaching has sort of grown from working with one-to-one, small groups to large groups, and then whole classes. And so I was quite comfortable doing group work, but then as the class grew and grew, I realised actually the group work was no longer working and in the big class environment. And so I reflected on that and thought, well, why isn't it working and what do I need to do about it? Because I was aware that some children were opting out and taking it as an opportunity not to engage in what the activity was. So, as I normally do, I went to a book first and went online for some inspiration, and I came up with these roll cards. And I've only got 4 roles, but you can have more roles or you can have less roles. The roles I chose, I can't quite see it, but I've got a presenter, scribe, timekeeper, and team rep. And on the card, it briefly explains what their role is. And every card says you have to contribute ideas, and then it explains what their particular role is. So they're pretty self-explanatory. The team rep one is kind of making sure that everybody has a voice within that discussion time. So the timekeeper has to make sure they achieve everything they're supposed to achieve within that time, and also finish on time. Scribe is fairly obvious, and then presenter, if we feedback either they feedback to another group or they feedback to the class. I've been using this with my guided reading group mainly. So they're a group of about 12 students, but I do want to introduce it in my whole class as well and get the opportunity. And it's worked really, really well. I've had positive feedback from the students. They want to try a different role next time, so they're keen to try all the different roles. And it actually has kept them more focused and on task with what they're supposed to do. They realise they all have something to do. So something I want to develop so that actually I don't actually need to give them the card, and they'll probably hopefully self-regulate it once they get the idea that yes, you know, this is not an opportunity to switch off and be silly. I'm gonna.
It's a really good idea.
Going to move forward with this. So it's definitely something I'm going to keep using because it might not work with older learners, but for the age I'm working with, it seems to be working really, really well.
Did you say you found that in the book, or you came up with it?
Yeah, I think I was trying to find. That was the one thing I couldn't go back and find in the time I had where I got it from, but I will find where I got it from. But
Jeff Pay probably might have something.
I did read it in one of the many books I'm not actually quite flying through. I've got a couple with me today, but yeah, I have read quite a lot of Jeff Petty tone as well. I lug it around with me sometimes. So I'll try and find where that was. But yeah, it did suggest more roles, but I sort of picked those 4 as I didn't want to make it too big, so I picked those 4. So that's one of my things that I use. Another, it's linked but slightly different in another teaching learning approach that I try to use a lot is pairs, group or whole class discussions. Something that in our setting we're trying to use more and more because our focus for this year is speaking and listening and oracy skills. So I'm trying to sort of get this as a regular thing in most lessons. So it may be something very simple as you quickly pose a question and you say, right, discuss it with the person next to you for a minute, and then you sort of know that they've all had that chance to think and talk, and when you then ask for responses, you're more likely to get more responses and not just get those same children putting their hands up. If we sometimes will have small group discussions or whole class discussions, small group ones, sometimes, as you've seen with my previous slide, they have those cards to help them. Sometimes, if we've got enough adults in the room, it's facilitated by an adult. I did one recently in an English lesson, and we had 3 adults in the room, so we split the class into 3. Each group had an adult, and they all had to come up with questions they wanted to ask as character in the book. And I think that probably produced a lot more than you might have if you just asked the whole class, what question would you want to ask this character? They were filling whiteboards with questions because they were bouncing off each other, so it was really, really effective. And it just ensures everybody has their voice heard in some way, even if they're not speaking in the whole class. They've done it within the group and it builds their confidence. It doesn't put learners on the spot. So that's something that I'm really, really working hard on at the moment. So moving on to communication methods and media, as my daughter being my photo model for me for this, is my first one that I've used a lot throughout, even when I was being a TA as well, creating lessons and activities, is games and activities. When I started in education, I was working with preschoolers, so I've always had this sort of thing within me that children learn through play, and I don't think that really goes away completely. I think we all like to play a game and learn. So I try to get these in when I can, just to make as long as I try and keep to the learning objective and make sure it is actually achieving the aims of the lesson, then if I can include some sort of activity, then I will. I do take a lot, although I'm getting better and better from my own ideas, I do take a lot of inspiration from books and TES and Twitter are my main ones. I think I'm going to end up doing a Twinkle subscription very soon too. So that's got the whole raft of resources and games on it. But I do need to be aware, sometimes in the amount of time I spend creating these resources, I think I need to be sure that I will use them more than once.
There's a definite cost benefit.
Yeah, because sometimes I can spend hours creating something and then it's been a bit of a failure or something. And so I think I've got a bit wiser about thinking this is really going to work, and getting Hannah to road test them for me.
You do have to road test them.
Yeah, she's very good at doing that for me, just to make sure it does work. And I think hopefully that makes the lessons more fun and memorable, and something they might want to do again and ask to do again. That's something I'd like to include. This was a video, I forgot the video that I was demonstrating. This is a multiplication game that we've created. So it can be used on your own, it could be used in pairs or groups. So literally just roll the dice, do the calculation that's in the square, and then move on.
You smart, wasn't you?
Yeah, I know.
Why wasn't it?
She puts me to shame with her. So you could just see the calculations wrong with it, and they'd have to move around, and there was some treasure at the end, so the aim was to get to the treasure. So I use that one individually in a lesson, but I would like to try and use it in pairs as well. So that's how I use it.
Did you have her permission to use the video?
I did ask for permission, yes.
I'm only joking. I'm just course you did.
So, she was, oh God, I don't have to talk. That's why it's a silent video. So this is flip chart. It's an old, possibly more an old-fashioned method of communication, or it's all, it's often been there. But something that I haven't used a lot, perhaps possibly because of a bit of lack of confidence in the past. But something, especially when I started teaching maths, that I had to use more and more, and find actually it's really quite beneficial because with the maths we have a flip chart with squared paper, so that that mirrors what the children have in their books, and they can actually see how they need to set the calculations out, and they can watch a live demonstration of the calculation working. In terms of when I've got the time, I'll get the children up as well to show how they would work out the calculation, and get them to do a little bit of teaching as well. So it's something that I've become more confident at using, and would like to try and use a bit more to sort of link back to the group work, to promote a bit more group work, and perhaps have small clusters of children perhaps using the flip chart and showing each other how they can use it as well. So I try and incorporate it a little bit more in my lessons. It's something that I'm working on using. So that's the flip chart. Moving on to resources. I think that resources are the one that really sort of stands out, that I use probably 90% of my lessons. Is a good old PowerPoint. Go for it. It's kind of my starting point actually for planning lessons, so I don't sort of sit and write my lesson plan first. I actually build my PowerPoint so I can kind of see how my lesson is going to flow. And this is one from a recent lesson, and actually this slide actually got scrapped because Matt saw this lesson yesterday. this turned into a triangle diagram of what the maths was. But I quite liked it. I thought the colours were bright, so I took that one. But yeah, so it just helps me, and it helps. I like having PowerPoint during lessons because it just helps me to keep the flow going and remind me what we're doing next, rather than me having to keep referring back to my lesson plan if I haven't quite got it all in my head. So I quite like that. We don't have these fancy interactive boards in our school, but I'd love to be able to get my hands on one and really explore, because I've seen lots of resources online that you can use with them, and I haven't sort of explored that side. So
Do you project onto a whiteboard?
yes. So yeah, I'll project images onto a whiteboard. I did that the other day with a game at the end. So we had a multiplication square, and I projected it onto the whiteboard, and then they were in teams and they had to fill in as much as they could in 2 minutes. So yeah, I've started doing things like that to try and...
Because I only recently got use of one of those. So my previous classroom just had a whiteboard. So I would project onto that.
Yes.
Actually, there is quite a lot you can do in that sort of situation.
But do you have to have IT people for when it goes wrong though? Because that's...
Oh, with one of those? Oh yeah, when that goes wrong and stuff.
They don't.
I did have real envy and we did look at that, getting a grant, what have you. And then I thought, well, have you just had, I don't think that IT supports.
They're not
when it goes
essential.
wrong.
You don't have to have them to be able to teach a class effectively.
I know, but...
And a lot of the stuff that Matt has shown me
Yeah.
doesn't work on my whiteboard, so being able to tap it and turn it into text, that's just flat out not a thing. Sorry,
but I've seen it being used in the previous school I was in. I wasn't in that class. They had one in the classroom. They had it really low down because it was the reception class.
Yeah.
And they were there, stood doing these physical activities, and it was great.
Again, you because they can move things around on it. Yeah. If you wanted to put them if you gave them, you could put those 6 letters up on the board in little text boxes that can move them around and put them in the correct order, that sort of stuff. I mean, the lady's got those hoops in her class that we saw with Jordan. That is a very practical way of doing it. Equally, you can do it with that, and they're still moving something around. But again, it all still takes. You still have to set those things up.
Something we've got a plan for probably for next term is I put the proposal to my mentor, and she said yes, do it, is that I'm going to offer the children the opportunity, and I'm going to force them, that gives them the opportunity to actually take a starter in my classes, and if they want to create their own PowerPoint, they can come up and use a PowerPoint, just as more ways to sort of, they can try and use the technology. So I've got some really keen, so I've got my guided reading class has got really keen upper ability class, and I think they'd be capable of sort of taking that on, and a lot of them are quite into drama and performing and presenting, so that where I've been using those role cards, I've kind of sort of seen those who are quite a few are keen to present, and I think they've really taken the challenge on. So I'll give them some guidelines of the sort of things that we're looking for, and then see what they come up with, and they might inspire me to as well. So it'll be interesting to see that one. Other resources that I've used, I've picked up two that I used last term, and these were Learning Grids and Crocodile Creek. Now the Learning Grid you've seen before, this is the one that we created, we had to create a resource, so you've seen this one before, this is my Learning Grid. So this is for an English lesson, but it's based on a grid reference chart, so the idea being, and I got that from this book here, this one, which is a really good book. So they had, we've developed, this has moved on now from my original prototype. My lovely daughter Hannah made me double-sided bags, so they have, because the feedback from this was that have two sets of numbers. So they have double-sided bag with different coloured numbers that correspond with the grid, and then they pick two numbers which gives them their grid reference, and inside here you could put anything in here. This one is all adjectives, and this was part of a lesson based on Danny the Champion of the World, so they had an adjective and then they had to write a sentence linked to what they'd read so far in the book. And there are different challenges on it. Some have got two words in, some says say choose your own adjective. And for me, this worked really, really well in the lesson. So I sort of built up to using this. And they all understood how to use it, because I had checked they'd done courses before, so they had some, a good idea of how to use it. And it actually created what I felt in that course period of time been teaching them some of their best work. So it's definitely something I want to use again. I mean, you can do this in any subject. I'd like to use it in maths. So you could have maths calculations in here, or you could have keywords for a particular subject of your own. So it's definitely something I want to use more, but with that caveat that this took a long time to make. So they are time consuming.
I suppose once you've made a grid, you can just drop things in. I mean,
the initial creation of it takes a while.
Possibly as well for older learners, you might just have the words. You might not necessarily have all the little pretty pictures.
It's eye-catching and attractive, isn't it? But yes, you could, and with the maths one, obviously it would be a lot more straightforward to just create something like
Do you
that.
end up doing that at home, or can you just at school?
Yeah, I did at home, but the school actually did copy it all colour for me, so that was really good for them.
Oh yeah.
Because you have to be a bit careful with the colour copying. But yeah, I do initially create most of my resources at home, purely because I'm only in school twice a week, so I don't have that sort of time to. I'm sure if I asked if I had some spare time, could I go in, but a lot of this is sort of weekends and evenings, so that's how it happens. And then my other resource I wanted to talk about came from this book, Talk Less Teaching, which is what I endeavour to do, and try not to talk as much. It's called Crocodile Creek, and this one, again, I used in an English lesson, but you could equally use it in maths or another topic. So the idea is you've got simple grids, it's obviously appealing to children again, and they have to cross the creek without getting caught by the crocodile. And I used it as sentence building, so they had, I did one with different types of nouns, and they had to create a sentence using the nouns across the grid, and I had increasingly difficult and bigger crocodile creeks for them to cross if they wanted to take the challenge. But then this one here is a maths one, so they have to get across and create a correct calculation that comes up with the answer that's at the top. I've used this twice, and it proved really, really popular. And it's with both of them really, you're sort of kind of crossing the curriculum and embedding other subjects. And obviously this one embeds maths and geography whilst doing English. So they helped me to achieve my objective, and the children were engaged and they didn't want to stop. So, but it was really interesting. I found, the reason I picked these two resources is at the end of that block I was doing grammar. I did a little survey with the children and said, which of these 4 resources did you enjoy using the most? And I said they could pick 2. There was 24 children in the class, and every single one of them picked Crocodile Creek. And then their other choice was split across the other 3, so I found it really interesting that all of them picked Crocodile Creek. So it's definitely something I'm going to use again. But most interestingly, the learning grid got the fewest votes, but it was the resource I felt they'd produced their best work in. So it was really interesting. I don't think it wasn't that they didn't like it. I think they just perhaps enjoyed the fun of the Crocodile Creek more. And the Crocodile Creek did produce good work too, but that happened earlier, and I think they've developed and they used the adjective grid as well. But I thought that was really interesting. And also learned how to create graphs in Excel, and I've done that before. It's really easy.
I did a lesson on it last week.
How easy is this? Moving on to assessment, something I use but perhaps not often enough is self and peer assessment. And this comes up all in English, and we give a chart made up. This is a very basic one. They can be more complicated, so they have a task to do, but they're given this while they're doing the task. So a simple chart like this, which shows what they're trying to achieve in their writing. And it's beneficial for the learners so they can see what they're supposed to be achieving, and then at the end they can read. We often sort of say, have you finished? Read your work back. But if they've got this, they can read back and look and see, well, have I achieved this? So the aim here was to write speech using inverted commas and correct punctuation. So it's basically asking, have you put the inverted commas at the beginning and the end of the speech? Because they often will put it at the beginning and then they forget it at the end. And have they used a capital letter at the start of the speech? Have they put their punctuation inside the commas? So this is a really good example because you've done the task really, really well. We do extend these charts sometimes, so this is their self-assessment, and they might then give it to a peer to peer assess, and then we have a third column for the teacher to assess as well. But that's a really basic one. If there's something I'd like to use more, I need to get more into using it and have them really proficient. Because I think there's still sort of some more able to do it than others. Sometimes we'll put a little box for leave a positive comment as well, and that's something they need to practice too. So hopefully as I'm sort of teaching more regularly and getting regular classes, then I can try and make that a regular part of their learning process. Other assessment method that I probably use the most is question and answer. I find, in my experience, the majority of my classes that I teach, they're very keen to engage in question and answers, so I think we're quite lucky in that respect. And I make a conscious effort to try and make sure I speak to everyone in the class at least once during my lesson. And I've read in one of the other books I've read, I think the ideal is 3 times, but that's not always possible, depending on what you're teaching. And I try, with the smaller groups, I have a little list of them on the board, and then once I sort of keep an eye on who I'm talking, that helps us keep an eye on who we're talking to, and we have a bonus system, so when they're giving sensible, good contributions, or they're showing good listening,
Christine showed me when she was doing Christine, the vice principal here, showed me a little map she kept track of my responses, my questions, and who I had asked questions to
Did
during
you?
the lesson.
Ah.
So I was kind of vaguely veering towards the left-hand side of the classroom for some
Oh, that's
reason.
interesting.
And then, so actually since then, I've actually kept a little bit of a map occasionally myself as well to make sure that I'm doing. Yeah, no, it was really,
Yeah, apparently we all have a blind side when we're teaching.
Probably, yeah.
So
That's
that
surprising.
we
Mine's
do
all right,
actually
aren't they?
gravitate towards one side or
Mine's
the
all
other.
of my students.
So,
Mine's all of my students.
it's
Just talk to the board. Just talk to the board. They go away eventually.
Yeah. I use it in various ways. I'll use it at the beginning of lessons to assess what they might already know, because sometimes I don't always know that in the sort of situation I'm in at the moment. I know what I think they should know, but because I'm still getting to know some of them, I don't always know what they might know, and there's no point in me telling them things they already know. So I'll sort of throw in some questions that I thought was interesting yesterday when I was teaching Bob class. I think I had 3 hands go up that they knew the word, but none of them knew what it was. So I knew I had to start from the very beginning. And there's no point me telling them what it all stood for if they already all knew. So I would have wasted 5 or 10 minutes of learning time there. So I also find it's quite good for uncovering misconceptions as well. And then you might get a bit sidetracked, but it's worth going down that sidetrack just to make sure that they're with you in the lesson as well. I try to use the pose, pause, pounce, bounce method, but I think sometimes I get stuck on number 3 and don't always bounce. Or maybe don't bounce enough, or not bounce once and then let it stop, and so because you're always sort of pushed for time and you sort of feel, you've got so much you wanted to achieve, but something I want to try and do is plan what I'm going to ask more. So, sometimes they're just sort of off the cuff questions, or I think, I'll ask them this, or we'll feedback about these questions they've written in their book and things like that. So I want to sort of have more planning going into my question and answering so that I can better assess the learning and see whether I've achieved the objectives. So that's something I'm still working on, but one of my favourite assessment methods. So in summary, I thought, well, how am I going to sum this up? And I went looking for some quotes just to sum up this reflection. So found this one. I thought this is what it felt like at times during my the last teacher training, and this will probably still happen in the future. So I quite like that.
But if you get a new module, it still feels very much like that.
And this one, I think is quite important because I'm always wanting to learn and improve, and I think it's important for my learners to know as well that I don't know everything. And we all make mistakes. I've recently been shadowing the French teacher in the middle school. I haven't done French for about 30 years, and the children still say, "Is this right?" And I'm like, "Okay, let's just have a look in your book and see if you've already done this before, because I don't really know." But yes, it's quite good for them to see that you're fallible as well. But so I got that one. I still want to learn more. I've already got things I still want to learn. And then this one I really like because I try and aspire to be the kind of teacher that involves my learners, and I want them to know that I value their thoughts and ideas, and I want them to look forward to the lessons, so they're not going to look forward to it if I'm just going to be talking at them and things. So I like that one. That was my final quote. So that's it really. I found the whole process very thought-provoking, and hope most of what I do is effective. But yeah, I've got plenty of things that I still want to learn and do.
Good. Thank you very much.
That's it.
Thank you.